Hey, what's going on? I'm Joe Cronin. Welcome to the Toss-Up. This show goes out to the Reggie Bushes and the Johnny Manziels of the world, as it's all things NIL or name, image, and likeness, if you prefer saying the extra syllables. Stick around because we have a fantastic show coming up on the Toss-Up. I clearly have a recent trend of discussing some of the most influential stories in college sports lately, but it only seems right to talk about something that has been such a driving force ever since the Supreme Court ruled in favor back in the summer of 2021. That would be athletes being able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. It's an absolutely stacked panel here today. It's not Halloween yet, but I did assemble the Avengers. Got my man Zion Brown, writer for the Indy Star and co-sports director for WIUX, Indiana women's basketball player Sydney Parrish, and of course, director of the undergraduate studies here at the media school, Dr. Galen Clavio. Thank you all so much for joining. I guess we got various perspectives working with this show. Sydney, I'm going to go to you right away. You're a huge face here at Indiana University with NIL, one of the most prominent figures, along with being a Division I athlete. What does that mean for you?
It means a lot. I'm very thankful that I have the platform I do to exceed in NIL and in my sport here at IU. It means a lot, and it means a lot that the university really supports us as well. I mean, there's a lot of people in the media school like you guys that want to talk about it and learn more about it, and then there's people on the athletic side, like our athletic directors and everyone in those offices that really want to just see us succeed and want the best for us.
When did you see your first moments wanting to try and pursue some of these deals that you have now?
Yeah, I would definitely say when it first got released in the summer of 2021, we saw it coming. We knew it was going to be a thing eventually. And once it came out, I really was, trying to be at the forefront of it and just kind of be the first one to start getting these deals. And I think just being able to be on such high athletic teams and being one of the top teams in the country, it definitely has helped my chances on, getting some of these bigger deals.
Now, Zion, as someone who covers sports pretty religiously as you do, what have you noticed as players are now able to kind of make a name for themselves outside of just playing the sport?
I think I've noticed, and I think a lot of people have noticed, just how much closer college sports are to professional sports than maybe we realized 5, 6, 10 years ago. You know, we see Shedeur Sanders and Deion on a KFC commercial. You know, stuff like that is becoming well known, and now people realize, okay, this is a big deal. There's a lot of money involved, and now we're finally seeing that money go to players for the first time and not just the coaches and athletic departments.
Now, Galen, what went into making all of this possible through NIL, and now players are really able to just kind of be their own entrepreneurs?
Well, what went into it was the schools couldn't agree on a common set of rules. And this happens a lot with the NCAA. People forget it's a big organization full of people that have different purposes. And, Indiana and Michigan and Georgia are in the same organization in the NCAA as Rose-Hulman is. And those are very different types of schools. They have very different types of needs. And so NIL, this has been something that, as someone who studied this, who teaches college sports business, I've been calling for college athletes to get paid for a while, whether that was through the universities or independently through businesses. And there's really not a legal justification for them not to be able to make money off of the fact that they're popular, they have market value. It just was a matter of essentially the NCAA being in a position where they had to be taken to court. And the courts had to say, no, what you've been saying for decades is wrong. Athletes do have the ability to make money, just like you do, Joe, and just like you do, Zion. You're both students. You're able to make money. I'm guessing you're not writing for the Star for free. But that's been the argument with athletes. Like, well, you're on scholarship, so therefore, you can't make money. And that's always been just a ridiculous argument as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, so I do want to segue a little bit into the social media aspect. We'll talk about more specific deals later on the show, and that'll bring me back to Sydney. You use social media pretty frequently with TikTok, Instagram, have a massive following. What kind of goes in, do you have a plan when you, figure out your posts, or what goes into some of those day-to-day aspects?
I don't have a really big plan on it. Obviously we get a lot of photos from our media team after games and stuff, but the big thing is for me is just trying to post regularly, whether that is on TikTok or on Instagram. And I think it's really hard during the season to keep that balance between she's always on Instagram, she's always on TikTok, all she cares about is her followers and getting likes and not being on the court. But I try to keep a good balance between that, like trying not to post on game days just so I can, really focus on the game. But it's just really fun for me. I think I have a lot of fun with it, and I like interacting with either fans or just my followers in general.
You did mention at the start you're a part of one of the best college basketball programs in the country, currently number 9 in the preseason poll, and balancing that as a starter on that team with what you do with social media and some of the brands, what are some of the difficulties through that?
It's a really big balance between not just social media and basketball, but school and your social life and, rehab. And I was just explaining to everyone today that, today's been a day. You're seeing a raw version of me in a day of a student athlete who deals with NIL, sports, school. I haven't been home since 7 a.m. I haven't eaten dinner. I haven't showered since practice, I'm going to be honest, and I still have NIL emails to answer tonight and a photo shoot to schedule for tomorrow. That's because it's my off day. And it really teaches you how to balance all these things and what your main priorities are.
And the off day is referring to practice being an off day, like it's still not an off day with some of the NIL stuff?
Yeah, off day tomorrow, it's actually going to an appointment and then going to do rehab and then going to do a workout and then doing an NIL photo shoot, and then I have class for 4.5 hours after that.
Yeah, not everyone is cut to be a D1 athlete. I'm starting to realize more and more. We'll stick to social media. Zion, I'll bring it to you. With the way that social media has just exploded really in the past decade, 5 years even, how have you seen just the coverage of being the teams and now these players are able to brand themselves more evolve in the past couple of years?
Yeah, it's a comfortable way to control your own image. Now, obviously, that can make it difficult, or you don't get to see the whole person through social media. They only post what they want to post. But you get to control your image. You get to think about what you're posting and really just say, this is how I want my brand to look. This is how I want myself to be aligned. And so that's what social media does. It's added an extra element from the reporting side of just looking at, okay, we have to look at a player's social media, see what's going on there, see what type of stuff they like and what they're endorsing. Of course, Sydney has her dog that is all over the place. So social media has definitely added an extra element to the media aspect of athlete coverage, of just general coverage. I know a lot of coaches are on it too. So it's definitely something that has changed the way we consume sports, but I think it's for the better.
I feel like for the most part, opinions-wise, social media is very up and down. Some people either love it, and then some people think it's really kind of a disaster to some of the mentalities throughout life. Galen, I'll go to you with that. Where do you think social media stands in terms of athletes being able to brand themselves?
Well, it gives you a way where you don't have to rely on a television station or a newspaper or a journalist to carry your message for you. You can do that yourself. Sydney can choose who she wants to partner with and then create content, because this is the thing that people don't realize. That's what the businesses want. They don't want to create their own ads and put Sydney or another athlete in them. They want Sydney's followers, and they want something that seems authentically like Sydney in those roles, even if it's just a framed version of you. But I think that's important, and I think that realistically that's how people your age consume media. I mean, you're not sitting at home necessarily watching 30 minutes or an hour of television and watching the commercials, but you are on your phone and you're on Instagram or you're on TikTok. Every generation have to figure out, how do I reach the audience that I want to reach to try to sell whatever product, whether it's salads or cars or whatever, and be in the place where those consumers are at. And social media right now is the place to do that.
And it just seems like it keeps growing, like every platform across social media. Facebook and Twitter kind of having their ups and downs, but TikTok, Instagram seem to be the exponential increase right there. I want to transition more to the way everything started in 2021 this summer. Galen, I'll bring it back to you. What have you noticed as a change in some of the impacts through the past 2.5 years?
Well, I think the funniest one to me is when this launched. The NCAA was like, well, we can't have quid pro quo, or we can't have you have to, it's not pay for play. Like you can't be induced by NIL to go to a school, which is nuts that people actually thought that was happening. Of course, athletes are choosing where they're going because of the NIL deals that are available. It's changed so much because it was originally, well, hey, you can do your own camps and you can do all these little things that weren't going to have a negative impact necessarily on colleges and universities from a commercial perspective. Now we're seeing coaches in the press say, don't donate money for scholarships, don't donate money for facilities, donate money to NIL, because that's where we need it. Because as it turned out, athletes didn't really want the brand new practice facility. They didn't necessarily want the brand new, cafeteria. They wanted cash. And I would want cash too. That's not something that, that's not people being greedy. That's like if someone said, hey, instead of $1 million, I'm going to give you $1 million worth of something else, you'd be like, I'll take the $1 million instead. Right. And I think that that's a logical thing.
I think a vast majority of people would take that $1 million. No lies detected right there. Sydney, in terms of changes, just how have the opportunities for you kind of evolved in the past 2 years?
I'd say the most recent example is just being in an NCAA tournament. I think that's when a lot of the deals come in really heavily. I mean, I'm getting emails right now about the next year's Final Four. And they're like, hey, we just want to get ahead of this for March Madness. Would you want to do this, this, this? And I'm like, obviously I believe in us. We're going to make the tournament. But I'm like, they might be reaching out to some people and they might not make the tournament. So I'd say that's the biggest way I see it, evolving. They're just trying to get ahead of the game, like more than any other brands, and trying to get ahead of time because these businesses are reaching out to a lot of athletes, and a lot of athletes are wanting these NIL deals, and it's really important for them to make money, whether that's for themselves or their families.
So in terms of like deals that you're already a part of, like Sweetgreen, for example, how did that go about? Like, what's your process now with them, now that you are a partner with them?
Right. So I partnered with them about a month or two ago, and I was really excited because I really like Sweetgreen. I had it before they were in Bloomington, and so that was a really exciting opportunity for me because it is something that I like, and I really enjoyed doing these brand deals with places that fit my brand and that I frankly go to almost every day. And so I'm actually doing another shoot tomorrow with them, so I'm excited for that, for their new protein bowls. And I've never tried that, but it just makes me really excited to be able to share that on my social media and something that I am passionate about. And it's really good for athletes too. Sweetgreen is a really healthy place, and I think it's a great place on campus to be.
Zion, sticking with the changes, what have you noticed just throughout, and disregarding social media, just with some of the ways that athletes are pursuing these new opportunities?
Yeah, you've definitely seen the change that I think Galen made a great point about, and the fact that they don't really care about these new fancy locker rooms with a TV in front of your locker anymore. They want to know where are the direct avenues to earn cash at. And I think that's right, because you think about it, those are institutional changes. They're going to have an effect maybe past a player, but from a player's perspective, I'm only going to be here, maybe 2 to 4 years. I want to know, how can I get the most money-wise, financially, out of those 2 to 4 years, because who knows what the professional aspect goes down the line, where that's going to lead me, how successful I'll be down the line. I want to know that while I'm here, while I'm at this school, that I have the best chances to make revenue.
Sydney, I'll bring it back to you with some of these business deals that you have. Is there someone that's helping you along the way set these up, or are you kind of just your own entrepreneur?
Right now, I'm really my own entrepreneur. I work with a couple people that really help guide me, like my parents and just some family friends and stuff that read over some of the contracts just to make sure, everything's aligned. But I work with a lot of, when these businesses come to me, sometimes it's through an agency. So I'll be talking directly through the agency, not directly through the brand. So that's a really good connection, I think, post-college. I'm meeting a lot of people, not only through the brand, but through these agencies. And I think those connections are really important.
Galen, what do you think some of the impacts of having a connection like Sydney Parrish, being able to partner with these deals in Bloomington, especially just boosting the culture of Indiana as well as just the athletic culture as the NCAA?
It's interesting. There's actually, I'm going to go 2 different directions with this. So first, I think it's actually really a shame that schools aren't helping athletes negotiate through these deals and helping them to understand what the implications are from legal perspectives, from tax perspectives. It's one of the things that doesn't get talked about much with NIL is that the NCAA and the member schools of the NCAA basically said, oh, fine, you want to have NIL deals? Well, you got to do them all by yourself. And someone like Sydney, who's very media savvy, understands that space and has a nice support structure and can take advantage of those things. A lot of athletes that don't have that. They don't come from families that have a business background. They don't come from complete families in many cases. They don't have somebody they can rely on. And one of the things I hope we see change over the course of the next couple of years is that schools realize that there's an educational opportunity here to help teach athletes how to capitalize on brand value, how to deal with lawyers, how to deal with accountants, how to deal with taxes. Because otherwise you're basically setting people up for potentially putting themselves in a lot of trouble. The other thing I'll say is what I think is really awesome, specifically with like what Sydney is doing and other female athletes, is this is really the first time we've seen female college athletes get the level of media exposure that they've gotten up to this point. Some of it is because the sports have legitimately gotten a lot more popular, but a lot of it is because they've been able to use social media in NIL deals and capitalize on brand value that they have. And for a long time we heard, oh, college athletes don't have brand value, female athletes certainly don't have brand value, and I think most of us who studied media knew that wasn't true, but we've actually seen it in action now, and it's definitely not true.
You kind of just took the bridge away from me. I did want to transition.
That's what I'm here to do,
into
Joe.
The way that women's basketball has kind of shot up in the past few years, and I think NIL has played a huge factor in it. Sydney, I'll go back to you with this. Just how have you seen your sport in general grow so much, or like whether it's your peers getting involved and even your teammates?
It honestly just makes me so happy. Like, I grew up best friends with some of the biggest names in college basketball now, like Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark. Those are my two really close friends that I've known forever, and just seeing how they capitalize on NIL and how they're changing the game, and I get to play with players like Grace Berger and Mackenzie Holmes that are just growing the game as well. I mean, it's just really, really special, and seeing specifically like the Iowa game when they had 55,000 fans, like, you know, selfishly, I wish I was on that court playing with them. That'd be really cool, but it's growing the game, and it's just really special to see all these little girls coming into Assembly Hall, just having us as some of their, you know, biggest fans, and they want to be us someday. And I think that's really important for us to have good public figures for the little girls in Bloomington and in Indiana and just around the country wanting to be college basketball players. And I think that's where social media comes into play. And, you know, you're trying to show your best on social media, and that's kind of how we are as people too. And I wish a lot of people knew more about our team specifically and just some of the other college athletes, because sometimes they just see them how they are on social media, and they're really great people also.
Yeah, going to the games, there's always those autograph signings afterwards, saying hi to the fans, and it's just something that wasn't always made available prior to this being allowed. Zion, I'll bring it to you with the way that women's basketball has grown. You know, 55,000 at an exhibition match.
Yeah.
Hey, that's huge.
It's ridiculous, and I think the women's basketball aspect is something that some people, as Galen said, kind of predicted and realized was coming, and some people have kind of been really shocked by the way it's developed. And when you think about it, you know, the WNBA, there's only 144 spots, so they don't have a rule where you can leave college early. You have to do all 4 years in school. Well, what that leads to a Sydney Parrish, a Caitlin Clark, players that are out of school for multiple years, and their brand kind of grows at that school more than a lot of the men's players at the school, because they're leaving after 1 or 2 years going to the NBA. And so now we're seeing it. It's kind of like how college basketball on the men's side was in the 80s and 90s, where these players are there for 4 years. Everybody knows them. They become household names nationally or in their community. And so their brand value, their NIL value ends up being even higher than a lot of people expected. But those are now well-known names. You know, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are known by more people than any two men's basketball players you can name in the country right now. And that's because they've been around. Obviously, they're big brands, they're big personalities, and those have really vibrated throughout the whole country.
I feel like a lot of times when people first hear about NIL, the names they'll think of is the Bronny James, Caleb Williams, Shedeur Sanders, and it's a lot of times, you know, the last name has a pretty big impact in some of these implications, and then obviously if you're Caleb Williams, you're a generational football talent. And I like what you mentioned with being able to stay in college longer. I think that's bolstered the ability for women's basketball to grow. Galen, how do you feel like as a college athletics as a whole has been able to kind of prosper through these couple of years?
Well, I think in women's basketball it's probably had the greatest impact. I think in football you do see, and actually men's basketball I guess as well, you do see players who now think twice about automatically going pro, because if you can make $750,000 your senior year rather than going to the NBA and maybe not having a guaranteed contract, you think you're probably going to take the money, improve your stock, and see what happens afterwards. I think college sports is at an interesting breaking point, though, because there's, you know, most of these teams have, you know, they're tremendously valuable. They're tremendously meaningful to the people that follow them. They generate really good television ratings, but they've been treated like a temporary spot on the way to being a pro. And I do wonder, as there's more money coming in and it becomes more lucrative, do we see more college athletes staying around longer? And does that end up inadvertently helping college athletics, almost in spite of college athletics trying to have it go the other direction, because now there's an actual reason to stay in college?
I was going to ask about some of the future here in a little bit, but coming after the break, we'll break down some future with NIL as well as some of the specifics here at Indiana University through the eyes of someone who lives it. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the toss-up. Once again, great panel here, great discussion that we've been having, and I want to segue into more Indiana-specific stuff. It's particular with the Booster Foundation and collectives here in Indiana. Galen, I'll go to you first about what do these collectives mean? Like, how important are they really for the way that NIL is set up?
Well, given that the colleges and universities' athletic departments aren't acting as a clearinghouse for these deals, you have to have collectives in part for two reasons. One, it's a way for large-scale businesses to have somebody to talk to where they can find out which athletes need NIL deals, who might be available, what the process might be, and there's somebody there that can act as a go-between. It's also a way to get smaller-scale donors, just like your parents, for instance, or just the random person who's a big IU fan, to have a place to donate. $50 from one person isn't going to do a lot in NIL. $50 from 1,000 people, well, that might be something that keeps an athlete there for another year. Without a collective, you don't really have a good mechanism to bring that in. And so collectives kind of get a bad name because a lot of people view them as a way to cheat. But this isn't cheating. This is just the economics of college sports right now. And it's interesting, Indiana's actually got one of the best run collectives in terms of it's very straightforward. There's two different ways. There's a nonprofit one where you can get a tax deduction. That's called Hoosiers for Good. There's the for-profit one, which is for much larger scale donations from businesses. But they act as this conduit that allow IU athletes to take advantage of opportunities kind of more equally, whereas at some other schools it's not always set up that way, or you've got competing collectives that end up kind of hurting the process rather than helping it.
I did want to talk about Hoosiers for Good. It's one of the biggest NIL collectives, like you mentioned, and I'll bring it to you, Sydney. With Hoosiers for Good, you're partnered with the Riley Children's Foundation. I guess, what made you choose this particular nonprofit?
It was really eye-opening for me. I think that it's really important to stay in the community, especially with Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis. I'm from Indianapolis, so I thought that was a really good choice for me as well. And I love just being able to be a part of it, and it's a really good way of giving back. I mean, it's insane. We're given all these opportunities at IU and through NIL, and then you go and see these children who are fighting for their lives. And so it's really eye-opening, and I'm really, really excited to be a part of it. And I'm just also starting to do another deal with Make-A-Wish. So I'll do both of those for Hoosiers for Good, and it's a really exciting duo I get to do.
How do you think these nonprofits kind of work hand in hand in being able to show a positive relationship out to the general public about what NIL really is?
Right. A lot of people ask about NIL, and I think the first thing I mention is Hoosiers for Good and how it has helped these nonprofits. I mean, it's a huge deal. It's like people are donating to Hoosiers for Good, but we're doing something for the community, something for these children and these charities, and it's a really big impact. And I think that it definitely helps these organizations as well, seeing us help them, and it's making an impact on a lot of people.
Zion, not many schools have this big of a nonprofit collective. What do you think that shows just with Indiana's ability to push that as an NIL narrative?
I think it was really smart for Indiana to make that one of their main collectives for sure, because it creates a lot of these opportunities which, you think about it, it's like the NCAA fought against stuff like this for decades, basically, just the ability to go to Riley Children's Hospital or to partner with Make-A-Wish and be a part of charitable donations. Now that has really opened up, and Indiana has jumped on that aspect of it from the nonprofit perspective, and they've really jumped on that and made it the biggest nonprofit NIL place in the entire country. So it's like it's opened up a lot for the athletes. They're also getting good life experience out of it while also profiting through NIL.
Seems like through the true eyes we get to see some of the business perspective, and then you get a lot of true benefits that aren't just from money. Before we wrap up the show, though, I want to talk about the future. And obviously we can't predict it. We don't have that little globing ball to predict the future or something that makes our hair stand up or whatever. But Zion, I'll go to you first. Where do you see college athletics driving through NIL?
Well, there will be, I believe, more set-in-stone legislation for sure as we get further along in this. The NCAA kind of just had to introduce it because they were being pressed by Congress for the most part, and so they had to introduce it on the fly. But as we go more and more into it, we'll see more set guidelines for it. I know Indiana basically has no state NIL rules. That'll probably change at some point. And so we'll see more guidelines, and we'll see more stuff to for really all sides to make it a better experience for everyone going forward.
Yeah, Indiana, one of only a handful of states that don't have legislation. Galen, where do you see NIL taking just the whole college scene and how it's driving things?
I don't know we're going to get more solid laws unless there's a stratification in college sports where you've only got like Division I or FBS level schools in their own NCAA-like enterprise and everybody else in a different one. I do think at some point athletes are going to get paid directly by universities.
Yes,
It's
I
almost inevitable. I don't think that's going to make NIL go away. NIL is going to be the cherry on top of the sundae at that point. And it's still going to matter greatly. And I think for athletes at this point, what we're going to see is more of them cultivating market value as high schoolers and trying to learn social media, trying to build up a social media following, because when you get to college, you can be a good athlete, but your NIL value is going to be, at least in part, dictated, at least in the early stages, on what kind of an audience are you commanding, who's following your stuff. And I think that that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch, because it will lead to a lot more media savvy athletes as we go through time. And I'm really excited to see what that looks like.
On a personal level, do you think that could kind of hurt just the athletes that are starting to build a brand as a minor, and then they have to kind of create this facade as a 15-year-old and carry it on?
I think that happens already. I mean, you all were on social media in your teenage years. I mean, was that your real you, or was that a cultivated you?
Truly authentic version of
I
myself.
mean, look, here's the thing. Child actors have done this for decades. The idea that athletes can't handle a public persona and then a private persona, yes, there's going to be some challenges to that, but I don't know that that's any more challenging than just being a star athlete in high school and dealing with all of the idolatry and all of the pressure that comes with it. So look, your generation and the generation that follows have grown up with social media as a primary means of communication, and the idea that you're going to start building an audience because of your athletic exploits, I think it's already happening to some degree. It's more about how do you make it bigger and more effective if you're heading to college.
So Sydney, this brings us to you. And for the future, it's more specifically, what's your plan going forward in the post-grad life to try and continue building on the brand that you have?
Yeah, well, I do have a 5th year of eligibility if I want to take it. Not sure if I am yet. We're not saying
Not breaking it here yet.
No, but that's always an option, and that's also a huge reason why a lot of people are staying for college is because of NIL, and people have this is the last year people have their COVID year, and people are staying because of NIL opportunities. And post-grad, I'm in the media field, so I really like being on camera and on social media, everyone says, so I guess I'll stay in that route. But just connecting with more brand deals hopefully after college. I think I've built a pretty good following where I could still do that, and hopefully that just continues.
Well, it's just going to be an evolutionary change. It already was, but that's going to do it for this week's show. A huge thanks to Sydney Parrish, Dr. Clavio, and Zion Brown for joining the discussion. Be sure to follow at the TossUp23 and at the TossUp IU on both Instagram and Twitter, respectively, as well as IUSTV Sports on Instagram and Twitter. There's one thing left to do, and it only makes sense. It's money, but it's Monopoly money. I tossed it up. We'll see you next time.